Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chat. Not as good as yours, but hey, it's something. This video, as you can tell, comes out around the time of a very, very important holiday. Long time ago this day, we had something very special happen on this side of the planet. Something that has changed the factors and changed how the world is. That being my birthday, one of the most important holidays in the world. Oh, and there was like some independence war that happened on this day, like a long time ago. I don't really know. The third was always better than the fourth. So yeah, leave your wishes in the comments or whatever, or something, I don't know. Even not, it doesn't really matter. Speaking of things that don't really matter, here is a segment where I have to address something that I think is going to be somewhat disappointing. I made the decision that the shoutouts will be canceled. That's right, after 2 months, I've decided to pull the plug on this endeavor that I was doing, and it's for a couple of reasons. Some relating to them, some relating to me, some relating to the entire landscape, I guess. One, the intentions of this was basically not only to help broaden and build up all of our smaller channels, but also increase sort of like what I see, like what I view. The idea is like I would see what they're up to, they'd see what I'm up to, whatever, and maybe we'd all get a better understanding of different types of content or whatever. And of course, their audiences, my audiences would probably cross over if they don't already, and we could probably build each other up to become like more of a viable force. But the problem is, that's not necessarily happening. And it's not like, oh, I'm blaming them for not shouting me out or anything. No. I'm saying, like, as far as I can tell, like, their channels aren't growing, because my channel isn't even that big to begin with. So there really isn't much to grow on their side. And if you paid attention to the latest ones that I've done, you may have noticed a recent pattern that I haven't really been giving them the time to view their content and actually explain what they are. I mean, some of the ones that I've talked about already, I haven't even watched that much. And that's doing them a really bad disservice when all I can say about them is like, oh, they're just a streamer, with no really bearing on what kind of content they actually do. These past couple of weeks have been hectic, so I haven't really been doing that, and that's kind of a bad thing. And like I said, my channel isn't even that big to begin with, so I can't really do much to help other channels grow, when in fact, mine is having the problem of growing, and I should probably stay focused on building my own stuff before I can even think about building other people's stuff. Also, remember early on when I said like, oh, I'm okay with like these guys like ditching me in like 4 months or so, whatever, and then I would do like some vetting, but not complete vetting. Eventually, like a lot of the ones I would find, they kind of just fail. Like with some of these people, I'm not gonna, you could probably figure out who it is, but like I'll look in their follows and they'll be like, okay, they're following, like they claim to be like, oh, we hate X creator, but then they follow people who are like in the orbit of X creator. And then it's like there was this recent one that I was looking into. It's like, okay, is this person any good? And it's like, oh, they follow Nico House, Mikasa Sukasa, Jimmy Dore, blah blah blah. Like it's like I can't in good faith shout this person out. And then I would encounter another problem. You see, some of the people that I would like find that I would think I would want to shout out technically don't necessarily fit in the category of needing to be shouted out. Like, for example, there was this one account. Again, I don't think I should say any names just because, which like they have a YouTube account and it's like very, very small. But then I go to their Twitter account and it's like they're incredibly massive, and they've been following me for a while. And it's like, can you not share your cloud too? Look, I know that's like a little bit petty, but I'm just saying it's like, again, like if they have like 13K followers on Twitter and 100 subs on YouTube, it's like, should me shouting them out really matter? That doesn't matter. They have like a big platform already. And there was another problem. You see, a lot of the accounts that I found that I wanted to shout out, turns out a lot of them are just dead accounts. Like I haven't posted anything in months. Like, they'll post on Twitter a lot, but it's like they haven't posted content on their accounts in a while. Like, actual content. I also give myself, like, a little bit of a caveat of, like, I didn't want to shout out low-effort content, but when you're a channel at this size, a lot of our content is low effort. The last thing I want to shout out before we actually get into, like, the actual stuff is the issue of like where I kind of learned and didn't learn why bigger content creators don't do this. It's like, to a degree, I kind of got it. Like, you don't have the time to look into all these people to see if they're good or not. You don't have all the time and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, I also do think that if you're a bigger content creator, you don't have much of a fallback. Like, if Voss shouts out any of these people and they try to be extremely problematic, who cares? If Hassan does it, who cares? If Kyle Kalinske does it, who cares? In fact, Kyle Kalinske has done it before. And me shouting out these small creators isn't my responsibility. It, in fact, is these bigger creators' responsibilities. Especially when they say they're going to do that. Voss has stated that he fully intends to do that. Then there's also Hassan. It's like, Hassan is literally one of the biggest politics streamers on Twitch. Can he not shout out any of these smaller creators out? Like, I don't get it. Why am I the one who has to do this? Why do these bigger creators just, I guess that's kind of like what these like big creators complain about capitalism about. Like, they complain about capitalism and say, like, oh, the people on the top, all they really want to do is get rich and benefit their own bottom dollar. Well, clearly it's working here too. But anyways, I've talked a lot about that, so again, sorry if this is kind of a bad thing. I know a lot of you were excited to see this kind of like smaller creator shout out stuff. Maybe I'll do it again when my channel actually gets to a bigger point, but for right now, I don't think it's gonna be viable anymore. With that out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, we're going to be talking about Bill de Blasio, the guy who is a mixed bag for every progressive in the world. It turns out Bill de Blasio is trying to strengthen his progressive bona fides. Bill de Blasio has stated that he no longer supports AIPAC and wishes Nina Turner was in Congress. See, this stems from where, as the title says, Bill de Blasio has recently become critical of AIPAC. You see, Bill de Blasio was one of those, pro-Israel progressives, one of the ones that says, BDS is openly anti-Semitic and stuff. Well, he's basically talked a little bit, in a recent interview, he's talked a little bit about how he feels that AIPAC has changed. Here's what he said: "They have changed in a way that is unacceptable to me because they have attacked people I believe in." And he's called out their super PAC, the United Democracy Project, saying that their attacks on Nina were horribly unjustified and deprived our nation of someone who could have been a huge difference maker in our progressive movement. Now, the thing is, in the interview, he states point blank, his positions on the Israel issue haven't changed, but he has essentially tried to be like, I'm now going to stand against AIPAC. But it's like, really? I get, Kyle Kalinske actually, believe it or not, this was one of the things where Kyle Kalinske, I guess, kind of made some good points in regards to how de Blasio is. He stated, de Blasio basically is a big talker, but not a big action guy. And it seems to be the case. During the presidential primaries, it's oh, he's so cool, so amazing. And he has all these progressive words that he loves to say. He ended up getting Bernie's endorsement for New York City mayor, but it's the actions don't necessarily match the words, especially considering I think it was the Black Lives Matter protests in his state, in his city, that made a lot of progressives go we're not necessarily fans of him. But it's weird that it seems that de Blasio's trying to position himself to be in a better stance than Mondaire Jones in this instance. Because here's the thing, Mondaire Jones is technically also a pro-Israeli progressive. So it seems like he's trying to, in rhetoric, run to the left of Mondaire Jones. But the thing is, it's really, I don't think anybody legitimately wants de Blasio over Mondaire Jones. Essentially, the progressive divide is, whether or not Mondaire Jones should be running in the seat at all. You see, because mostly on the ground, progressive action is backing Yu Lin Yo, and it seems out-of-state progressives are trying their best to, say, come on, we need to keep Mondaire Jones in there, he's the progressive already. And then there's, one or two upper middle class progressives, I guess, like the pro-Israeli progressives, like a Warren Dem-ish type people who would back de Blasio, which is ironic because Yulin Yo is a Warren Dem herself. But anyways, let's get off of that and let's talk about something that, believe it or not, I haven't actually talked about yet. The January 6 hearings. You see, the reason why I haven't talked about the January 6 hearings is because I try to talk about issues that the mainstream media doesn't talk about a lot. And the thing is, like, this isn't talked only on mainstream media a lot, but it's also talked a lot about on independent media, like Kyle Kulinski and Human Report, David Dole, and Majority Report, TYT. Like, they all talk about this issue nonstop. But I felt that this specific instance was worth talking about because this one was a huge thing. See, Cassidy Hutchinson, an aide to former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, basically gave a very big testimony, which it was pretty damning. Like, if there was an actual threat that Trump would be arrested because of any of the things that were said here, I would be like, oh, this is big. I mean, it's big already, regardless. Basically, Hutchison testified for 2 hours, and she gave some recorded depositions about what happened, and she describes basically what happened in the lead up to the January 6th riot and some events during the January 6th riot, where basically she makes it very clear that Trump very clearly knew what was going to happen, or at the very least had an indication that things were not going exactly the way that he quote-unquote pretended to make it, saying that Trump very clearly was trying to egg on the protesters to become violent, and when they were invading the Capitol, Trump was demanding for himself to be transported to the Capitol, and then they were like, no, Trump, you can't do that. You have to be taken to a safe area, and Trump's like, no, I know for a fact that they're not going to hurt me. Come on, send me there right now. And they're like, no, we can't risk it. And then Trump literally grabs the wheel of the car and he's like, turn around, go. Because I guess the idea would be like, when the Capitol falls, he would be there to take up the mantle of like, I'm King President Trump. Now, basically, this kind of concludes very clearly, I mean, this is the thing. Like, this has been obvious since day one, and yet, for some reason, there's still, like, debate on this. And despite every single step of the way, there being attempts to try and make this, like, the best process, now we're in a position where it's like, this process at this point is, again, kind of meaningless. Like, need I remind you, we have people who claim to be on the so-called left who were defending the January 6th rioters. We have people on the so-called left that say, like, oh, the only reason that you don't like January 6th is because we didn't do it first. And it's like, no, the reason why I didn't like it is because I don't support running into the Capitol and trying to kill people. And they go, this was just a protest, man. Come on. It's like people were like, there's video evidence of people saying, like, shit's going down today and be prepared, America. Today's changing. And there's literally merchandise that was at the riot saying, like, very clearly bad intentions. The day before the riot, Lauren Boebert literally gave like some people who would be on the riot tours of the Capitol. She tweeted Nancy Pelosi's location the day of the riot. The crowd was literally making death threats to members of the government. This is literally super cut and dry. I don't understand why there's even a single shred of doubt at this point. But then again, we live in a world where a majority of the people in our nation don't even believe in, like, science and logic for anything, and believe that there's a magic sky fairy, but, I mean, whatever. Speaking of things that are, whatever, third parties. There are two third-party stories that I thought were interesting. First, coming from the good old state of North Carolina, and it's not a good one. Matthew Hoh was denied ballot access in the North Carolina Senate race. Now, this has been a building story for a while, and I've basically reached the conclusion, and unfortunately it's not a good conclusion, but basically for the past couple of weeks, there was like this huge debacle over the signatures of Matthew Hoh, the Green Party candidate for Senate. Now, since the results of the last election were not to their benefit, they needed to get 13,865 signatures to get on the ballot. And they got a little over 16,000 or 17,000, and 15,000 were verified to be legitimate, thus guaranteeing them to be on the ballot. However, there's been a concerted effort by the North Carolina Democratic Party to try and raise suspicions over the petitions that were signed, getting calls, emails, texts, basically asking the people who signed the petition, hey, are you sure you want to be on the petition? I mean, you can be not in the petition, and if you don't want. There are two instances that I want to talk about. First was one given to Matthew Hall himself, where a person said, hi, my name is Drew, and we're texting you because your name was listed on the petition to help blah, blah, blah. And they said, did you sign it? He said, yes, I did sign it. And they said, thank you for confirming. If the Green Party is on the ballot, it will give Republicans a huge advantage and will help them in the North Carolina races in 2022 and 2024. In past elections, we've seen that the Green Party takes away votes from Democrats, which helps Republicans win. With abortion rights in the balance, we can't afford to give Republicans more of an advantage. Are you interested in asking the Board of Elections to have your name removed from this position? Yes or no? And they said, no. And they said, I understand, this seems like a lot of effort, but we want to make sure Democratic candidates have the best chance to win this November. Would you be willing to have your name removed? And they said, no again. And they said, thank you for your time, have a nice day. He asked, what organization is this? And they said, this is from the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Now, that one seemed pretty straightforward, except, again, they kept pressuring him. Normally in these instances, you ask them, hey, no, and then they say, okay, no, and then they leave. But they kept are you sure? It's one of those things where it's are you sure you don't want to have your credit card information leaked? Now, but here's the thing. That guy, David, had a very, he was the most transparent of them all, because apparently, this is one that's funny. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you the story of Tony Ndeghe. Tony Ndeghe got a phone call from somebody claiming to be a member of the North Carolina Green Party. And the thing is, they were basically asking him the same questions. Do you want to be removed from the ballot? Democrats are going to have this big problem going in November, blah, blah, blah. Basically the same spiel. And Tony Ndeghe asked a couple of questions hey, why would the Green Party want to get their name removed from the ballot? And after they asked that question, the phone call immediately ended. Now, you might say, how did Tony know that this is very suspicious and clearly not the Green Party? Well, aside from the very obvious fact of the Greens literally saying we don't want to be on the ballot, even though we asked you for your signature to be on the ballot. But here is one very stupid mistake they made. They decided to call him despite the fact that he is the literal chair of the party and knows for a fact that he didn't authorize calls like that. In fact, he's even stated he doesn't authorize these kind of calls for any party. If they were on the Libertarian ballot, he wouldn't do that either. He doesn't do the kind of things. And sadly, in the three controlled, it was 3-2 to get Ho off the ballot. And those three happened to be the Democrats. Of course, it fell under partisan lines. The Republicans voted to keep the Greens off the ballot, and the Democrats voted to keep them on the ballot. But this is the biggest thing, right? It's this is just so useless because polling-wise, Ho is doing absolutely terrible. The highest amount he's polling is 1%. The last poll that I saw had him at 0.9%. And in the polling at 0.9%, Beasley was winning. The thing is, Beasley was just the worst choice to go up against Ted Budd. That was the obvious thing. Budd has continually polled the higher than Beasley because Budd, I guess, appeals more to the conservatives. They're more turned out to vote. Again, the Democrats literally played the same spiel that they did in the last cycle where they bullied Jeff Jackson off the ballot. He didn't even get a chance to be on the ballot. They bullied him before he even considered running for Senate. But this time, since they promised him a nice, cozy house seat, he was able to leave and be able to pave the way for Cherry Beasley, despite the fact that, again, it's pretty obvious that nobody really cares about Cherry Beasley. Even the people who are ideologically behind Beasley are literally this is the worst decision that the Democrats could have made because Beasley lost a close statewide race. So why would you trust her to then go into another close statewide race? The Democrats, of course, they picked the wrong message. They were like, oh, the problem was that we didn't rig it for the black woman. That was the problem. It's like, no, the problem was that you rigged it for the least likable candidate, and you still did that. It's just so dumb. Speaking of dumb stories, this is going to be a shorter one, which segues into the next quote-unquote story. Basically, there's a candidate in the New York gubernatorial race, Larry Sharpe of the Libertarian Party. Turns out that Larry Sharpe is not a good person. He has dozens of campaign workers, and according to them, they owe him thousands of dollars. Here's the story. Dozens of campaign workers are voicing their frustration as they wait for final paychecks after spending hours on the street corners soliciting nearly 50,000 signatures for a petition to get the politician on the ballot in New York gubernatorial election in November. According to them, this was earmarked to pay my June rent. Many of them stating that they were in between jobs. They are unemployed, and they're like, this was our rent. And this news organization, they literally got Sharpe to meet with one of his campaign people, and he gave this spiel like, oh, I'm sorry, I was trying my best. I'm trying to get you guys paid, but money's just tight right now, guys. I'm sorry. And then he wrote the one that they had meet with him on the spot. But it's like, he owes 50 people $1,000 each. He literally owes $50,000 to people. But Sharpe, I guess, to a degree, it's like, he says that he promises to get every unpaid worker paid within 30 to 60 days. But it's like, why now? Because it's a news story? Why didn't you do this beforehand, when they were supposed to get paid? But anyways, speaking of elections, we could talk about some elections that happened recently. On the 28th of June, we got some W's, we got some L's. Let's take a look. First, we'll start off in New York governor's race, because that's the race that we were just talking about. Unfortunately, Jumaine Williams has lost the Democratic Party nomination. However, there is hope that he could potentially run for the Working Families Party, in the general election. But again, given the Working Families Party track record, I wouldn't bet on it. And it's more than likely that we're going to be backing Howie Hawkins in November. Next is a W in the South Carolina Senate race. Crystal Matthews won. She was the progressive candidate that was running in the seat. And honestly, it was kind of expected that she was going to win. I just didn't expect that it was going to be into a runoff. But, I mean, a win is a win. I finally ended up endorsing her because she actually managed to win. And in Colorado, we have District 1, where Neil Walia lost. It was pretty much expected. And in Colorado District 3, as of the time I'm recording this, it seems that Sol Sandoval lost. But apparently, some of the people were calling it for the opponent, but it seems that numbers are still being counted, so there's a chance that she might have won. She might have actually, slightly edged out to winning. But, the one guy that, did the BS campaign, the actual shit that was falling on things, he got a very distant third. And in the Republican primary, Lauren Boebert won. I guess the fake allegations of her being an escort didn't really pan out, did it? But anyways, now on to the biggest state of the night, Illinois. And this is one where we had some W's and some L's. First, our incumbent still reigns supreme. Jan Schakowsky's going back to the House. And Chuy Garcia is going back to the House. And I guess I misstated that because I said that our incumbents were good, but it turns out, remember, they weren't. But we'll get into that in a bit. First, we're going to talk about some of the other L's. First, Keena Collins sadly lost. She was pretty close for the night, but it turns out the final results, she got pretty distantly far. It was 50-something to 45. It was close-ish, but I mean, still pretty far, relatively speaking. In Illinois District 13, David Palmer lost. To be fair, it was kind of expected that he was going to lose, considering basically the entire Illinois Democratic establishment, which included Chuy Garcia, backed the other candidate, but it was kind of a sadness seeing that David Palmer didn't make it through. In Illinois District 15, there was a Republican on Republican race, And unfortunately, the worst of the two Republicans won that race, Mary Miller, who, if you don't remember, she quoted Adolf Hitler, and during the whole, like, Roe v. Wade thing, she said something about, like, white lives, when she meant to say right lives, or right to life, but it's like, well, I mean, that's what she says she claimed to say, but, I mean, she's just taking the mask off. And in Illinois District 17, Letitia Wallace also lost. Very unfortunate. I was expecting her to actually pull through, but of course, I have to give the biggest L of the night. Like, I have to talk about the biggest L of the night. Marie Newman lost. So, for those who don't remember, Marie Newman is one of the Justice Democrats in Congress. And she's not a member of the squad. She's just a Justice Democrat. I don't know why she's not a member of the squad, but she's not. But basically, she made a lot of headlines due to the fact that she, like, was running and won in a primary against an anti-abortion Democrat named Dan Lipinski. And she was like and she and Cori Bush were basically like, oh, they ran in 2018 and they won in 2020. This is a very big thing for them. And Marie Newman has been a pretty decent progressive voice in the House. But then came some redistricting, and it put her at odds with another Democrat. Now, believe it or not, most people don't remember that this cycle, like this one, her versus Kasten, wasn't actually the original districting plan. The original redistricting put her in a race against Chuy Garcia, but then she decided to run in the 6th district instead. This is a very similar story to what happened with Dennis Kucinich and Marcy Kaptur and Mondo Jones to Jamal Bowman. But basically, Marie Newman was drawn into a Democrat v. Democrat race, and unfortunately, it just didn't turn out to be favorable for her. For a number of reasons. I guess the district is more Kasten's, because I think Kasten this was just Kasten's district, so of course it was more heavily to go to Kasten. But also because in this time period, she was also facing an ethics scandal. She did a literal quid pro quo and tried to get another progressive who was going to run in the 3rd district in the 2020 cycle to drop out and then work for her campaign instead. So it's definitely like she did do some bad things. And I will say, point blank, like, of all the Justice Democrats to lose, I mean, if it had to be anybody, I guess Marie was a good choice. I mean, again, like, she did literal corruption, so, again, clearly not necessarily Justice Democrat style messaging, but don't count too many L's, because, believe it or not, many people were saying, like, oh, because I think, like, a Humanist Report said this because he was, like, counting the results very early on, but it was, like, he said, like, the net gain of progressives in Illinois in Congress was none, like, was basically none because of that, but it's actually not the case. You see, it's a net gain of 1. You see, because 2 progressives won that night. Delia Ramirez won in Illinois District 3, the district Marie used to be in, and in Illinois District 1, Jonathan Jackson ended up winning in the crowded primary. For those who don't know, Jonathan Jackson is the son of Jesse Jackson and the brother of Jesse Jackson Jr. Now, Jesse Jackson Jr. He was a progressive and, like, did very progressive things while in the House. But he was also, he did also do, like similar to Marie Newman, like, he did, like, some corruption. Hopefully Jonathan doesn't do that. But I think Jonathan's a pretty good candidate. Like, I mean, there were some, like, questions about Jonathan Jackson because, like, apparently he, like, waffles a little bit on things, but he was endorsed by the Progressive Caucus and Chuy Garcia and Bernie Sanders, so I think he would be a pretty decent congressman. I mean, we'll have to wait and see how things pan out, but as of now, I think things are looking pretty good for progressives. Like, I mean, having the son of Jesse Jackson in Congress is pretty cool. Like, I mean, it would be cooler to have Jesse Jackson in the Congress, but, I mean, you take your W's where you can get them. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get into the main topic of this video. As you probably can tell, this video comes out on July 4th, American Independence Day, a holiday that is important to some and not important to others. And I'm going to use this time period to ask this question. Should the left be more patriotic? Because as we all know, the left has this huge perception by the right as being a bunch of people who hate America. Because we don't necessarily subscribe to the super nationalistic imagery of America that they want us to. America's always done good. No need to look further than what we were taught in grade school. And even if we did some bad things, we did good things too. We can move past them. We don't do bad things anymore. Blah, blah, blah. We don't need to do anything of the sort. And naturally, this has, of course, led to a huge political debate. The right usually taking up the mantle of, America good, and the left, therefore, seemingly taking up the title of America bad. But we're also getting a little bit of a debate within the left as well, or at least people who claim to be on the left. Because, as we go into it, you'll see some questions in regards to quote-unquote left. But basically, the left typically is not in the realm of super patriotic, nationalistic America goodness, but there are some sections that kind of lean that way. Like, for example, we have some people who call themselves anarcho-NATOists or anarcho-Bidenists or something like that, that basically do a lot of the U.S. foreign policy stuff. Like, a U.S. is inevitably the better person for foreign policy. But then we also have people who are, on the anti-American side that are, basically the reverse of that. Everything America does in the foreign policy sphere is bad, and, everything that is against that is good. Then we also have, a wide variety of other different topics. But first, I think we should address this question. What do we mean by patriotic? Now, here is the textbook definition of patriotic. The feeling of love, devotion, and sense of attachment to one's country. Of course, that's a pretty basic range of emotions. Feeling of love, devotion, and attachment to a country. Love, that's one thing. Devotion is a different thing. If you love something, that's one, you can love your favorite food. You can love pizza or something. But if you're devoted to pizza, that's quite a different thing. Those latter, devotion especially, would probably fit more in line with our ideals of nationalism, which is basically which to sum it up very small, is patriotism to a very unhealthy level. To break it up in different cycles, it would basically be the equivalent of a fan base. If you're a patriot, you're oh, I like this show or movie or whatever. It's fine. It's pretty good. You'll watch every episode. You'll talk in fan discussions about it, but whatever. Then the nationalists would be the people who are cosplay as the characters every day and role play and all that kind of stuff. Again, one seems to be quote unquote normal, and then the other is unhealthy. But there's also this other thing called left-wing nationalism, a form of nationalism based upon national self-determination, popular sovereignty, national self-interest, and left-wing positions such as social equality. It can also include aspects of anti-imperialism and national liberation movements, most commonly exemplified by the pink tide governments. But of course, that's a different discussion. That's for them. But I think the question is more focused on American leftists, especially since, it's pretty obvious, America, to a degree, is basically an antithesis to what leftists want. It's an extremely capitalistic and imperialist nation that has done quite a lot of bad things to not only left-wing movements, but just people all around the world. Slavery, genocide, the Trail of Tears, overthrowing of 20 different left-wing governments. Basically doing everything in their power to try and silence left-wing movements within America, against their own people. Our security state being very, very bad, again, for a lot of the aforementioned stuff that I stated. So should the American left be patriotic for their country when that's the country that they represent? If you're a Mexican leftist, you could be patriotic over Pemex, or you could be patriotic for the Zapatistas or something like that. But America, if you're a left-wing figure in America, it's like, it is kind of hard because a lot of the figures you remember growing up and admiring, it gets very difficult to continue to like them in left-wing spheres. Like, I mean, if you casually mention Thomas Jefferson, you'll get crap for like, oh, he owned slaves or something like that. He gets rightfully crapped on, but it's like, yeah, that's one of like the founders of the country. He basically kickstarted the beginning of the expansion of this nation to be what it is today. I guess, honestly, one of the biggest issues is what you mean by patriotic. Because depending on your viewpoint on what patriotism is, then it deters on what the answer is. You see, because there are a lot of people who look at patriotism, like, for better and for worse, and just basically equivocate it to nationalism. Like, I mean, we have two major sections of the left that literally do this. The anti-American left, people whose entire ideology is literally America bad, and people who are not America good, basically just equivotate everything, like, literally, like, their ideology is America bad, so if you like anything about America, that's bad. But then we also have people on, like, the complete opposite spectrum, who are, like, this is a new section of people that I didn't know what they were when I first talked about them, because if I did know, I probably wouldn't have said the things I said. You see, they are a group that is now known as the Patriotic Socialists. For those who don't know what that is, Patriotic Socialists are socialists who want Republicans to watch them. So they basically do all of, like, the very basic, benign, like, obviously nationalistic type of stuff that the GOP has been doing for years, but then just slap, like, a hammer and sickle on it. Like, some of the big people who do this are Kayla Maupin and Haas and Jackson Hinkle and, what's the other one? Peter Coffin. Like, Maupin literally went on this huge rant about, like, oh, why do you think that America is bad? I think America is great. But it's like, you're a communist. Shouldn't you be more critical of the United States? And again, he is sort of, like, quote unquote critical of the United States, but then it's like, he also goes around with, like, Abraham Lincoln stuff all, like, they don't do anything with that. Like, it's not like they even, like, crap talk certain aspects of people who do try to do something different, like the Communist Party with their Bill of Rights socialism. They get mad, and it's like, that's not real aspects of, like, communism or socialism. And it's like, what are you talking about? It's basically just communism, but put an American flag on it, or, like, conservatism, but put a communist flag on it. Like, for example, here's one thing they could do, like, take the U.S. Constitution, read it, and then give, like, a leftist interpretation. Like, I will use I thought about doing this, where I take the U.S. Constitution and then use it to justify, like, socialism or communism or something. And I still might do it, but it's like, that's a thing that they could do, but they don't do it. Take actual things that you can do to try and merge the two things together. Like Earl Browder, a person that Maupin claims to love so much, desperately tried to merge the ideas of, like, the Soviet Union with the US of A, try to, like, make this into, like, some broad synthesis, make the, like, and here's the thing, one of the things that they did to do this, these guys would be against, but, like, Earl Browder literally just basically started, like, a Justice Democrats for communists, and tried to get communists to, like, become, like, super pro-America and stuff, and did this. Like, he didn't do it to, like, make them more right-wing, he did it to make the, like, it's the same thing with Fosh and gamers. It's like, the idea is like, oh, we infiltrate this one specific thing, but then it's like, are you actually making that group more like you, or are you just becoming more like that group? This isn't something new. Like, other lefties have tried to do this. Like, She One Head is apparently a part of this new, like, patriotic leftist thing. She has, like, an American flag in the background, is like, does, like, the same BS. Alan Grayson, former progressive congressman, like, basically he went to Congress every single session wearing an American flag, basically being like, basically saying, why should the conservatives be the only one that say that they love America? Why can't we say it too? But that's the thing, like, this is all coming from the definition of, like, loving America as it is. Like, you love America because Like, basically, they start on the realm of, like, America is already good, ergo, we should like it. Like, that's sort of like what the conservatives say. Like, they're like, oh, America was good. In fact, they literally point to, like, older versions of America to say, like, oh, it's good. Look at what we've done. And these type of leftists will kind of usually go along with them, but then also not really do anything of substance to try and, like, actually make it like a leftist version of patriotism or something. They're literally just like, oh, we're patriots. They take the right-wing interpretation of patriotism, but then they just jump on that. But what if your interpretation of patriotism is a little bit different? And, like, your interpretation of, like, loving this nation or anything of the sort is different. Like, what if your interpretation is just loving the people of the nation? What if your interpretation is that you love the things that, like, the good things that America has done, but you also want them to improve upon themselves? And not only by that extension, you want to improve the world. Back to the one I said previously, like, helping the people of this nation, like, help them because you love them. Like, you don't think that the nation is, like, you don't believe that the country is, like, the state. You believe the country is the people you see every day. You believe that the country is just your average Joe Schmo, or, like, historical figures that have helped pave the way to make the U.S. into what it is today. Of course, you don't want it to just jump onto, like, oh, we're just, like, basically, like, conservatives and, like, oh, America's great, oh, America's lovely, whatever. There's never been a single bad thing that has happened in America. But you also don't want to, like, just say, oh, America is just irredeemably bad and we should never, ever, ever support America. I mean, if you saw that title, you probably would have guessed by this point what side of the aisle I sort of lean on. And basically, for lack of a better term, I do believe, yeah, I think the left should be a little bit more patriotic. If not, only so that it is a good, like, marketing strategy. Like, I mean, listen to me. My YouTube username is Pluribus Unum, and I talk about mostly American political history. I'm clearly not in the America is irredeemably bad crowd, but I'm also not in the, oh, America can do no wrong crowd either. Like, sure, you can admire aspects of certain historical figures, like Theodore Roosevelt, I was going to say Thomas Jefferson. Like, of course you can admire aspects of, like, these very flawed historical figures, but we can also acknowledge their flaws. Like, in my viewpoint, being patriotic or, like, loving history or anything of the sort is the good and the bad. Like, for some reason, like, again, this is the right-wing issue, right-wingers really love to take this, like, they think loving history is literally just like, oh, the regurgitating stories of, like, America good, America good, America good. And if you teach the kids anything of the sort that is opposite of that, you're teaching them to hate America. It's like, no, I like America despite all of this bad stuff that I've learned about it. I still like America. Because I like the people of America. I like the freedom of speech of America. I like aspects of the American way of life. I like the freedom, a lot of the freedoms that we're given. But I also don't like aspects of America, much in the same way that I know you don't, but you don't want to claim that because your viewpoint is that you love America despite everything, even though your version of America is vastly different than the America that we live in right now. In fact, it is very much different than the America that you lived in back then. You just didn't understand it. If you're conservative and you're claiming you love America, then you should love the fact that Pride Month exists. You should love that Juneteenth exists. That's a very vibrant aspect of American history. But why would you hate it? If you hate it, that means you hate America, right? In my viewpoint, patriotism is literally like loving your country so much you want to make it better. Like, again, acknowledging all of our past mistakes, acknowledging all of the bad that we've done, but also looking to improve upon it. It's like, I remember this, like, it's funny that I hear this. It's like, this is an amazing atheist quote that I'm, like, using that I think it actually is, like, a really poignant one. It's like the right wing's, like, thing is make America great again. That should not be what you're running on. You should be running on making America better than it ever was. And that should be what the left wing strives for. Make America better than it has ever been in history. The U.S. has done a lot of bad things. Slavery, colonialism, genocide, imperialism, racism, and the etchings of these problems are still around to this day. But think about it, we're also the nation that helped defeat fascism all across the world. We're the nation that sent a man to the moon. We're the one who ended our original sin. We're the nation that inspired more radical revolutions. Like, a lot of the left-wing revolutions, to a degree, are inspired by the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Mexican Revolution, way more radical revolutions than the American Revolution was. And they were inspired by the U.S. and all the bad things of America that you can look towards. You can also look to a lot of good things. Like, for example, like Maupin, I bet he had to look a while to find freaking Earl Browder. And it's like, you can find a lot of these figures in American history. The Squad weren't the first socialist elected Congress. There are tons more that have pushed for socialist reforms throughout the entire history of the United States. As I said, there is an argument you could make to use the freaking Constitution and Bill of Rights to justify left-wing action. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? That sounds like socialism to me, buddy. It's the same thing with learning history. I don't believe that learning history is, oh, you learn America good, America good, America good. It means you learn all of history. U.S. has done bad things. So what? That's part of our history. U.S. has done good things. That's part of our history too. This one's a more rambly episode, I guess, because I don't really know if there's an actual point. I'm pretty sure that you can listen to this and be like, that makes no sense. Whatever. But I gotta reiterate this many, many times. I'm saying this as not to justify, oh, go back on our things. America's great. We don't need to do all these big reforms. No, I mean, making it so that we're great, that we should do these great reforms. If we're the greatest nation in the world, we should be doing these great reforms as well. Anyways, I guess that's pretty much all I can say. I think my voice is giving out, so I guess I'll end it here. Left should be a little bit more patriotic. Not all the way, though, because if it were, you wouldn't be left-wing. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when a future video comes out. And if there's some more content from me, you can go on my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, check out my articles on the Independent Political Report, or consider supporting me on Patreon.